Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Norfolk Wildlife Trust's AGM in our 99th year. So we have a jam-packed programme of formal business and informal business tonight. The formal business will come first, and it will be followed by a brilliant panel discussion. It's going to be great, and entitled "The Power of Nature for All," and it's chaired by Nick Atchison. And we have panelists Ellie Leach from the BTO and David Schrager of Inclusive Norwich. And we have Sarah Lapinova, who's Norfolk Wildlife Trust's EDI officer. So that's coming up after the formal business. We hope to conclude the formal business in about the first 50 minutes. Hopefully there'll be time for a quick break if we're not running too late, and then we'll get on to the really interesting panel discussion, the highlight of our evening. But thank you very much for joining us. We've got a lot to get through. It is an evening, if you haven't voted already, where you can vote this evening. I'm just going to talk through some of the voting details. So members who are voting today, so if you haven't voted already, please make sure you're connected to the My Voice voting platform via the link which has been sent to you via email. So do check your spam or junk folder if it's not arrived in your inbox. And it's probably a good idea to have this open ahead of the voting process starting. Please note that given the virtual format and method of voting, we will confirm whether the vote has passed later in the meeting. The voting platform will be open at the start of the meeting, so you can vote on the resolutions right now or when the invitation to vote is called. If you're attending the meeting but have previously voted, you'll not be able to vote again during the meeting. If you have any problems at all, please contact My Voice directly via the contact details shown on that email. So we'll crack straight on with the formal business, and we have obviously, as usual, myself, I'm just kind of hosting, and we have Alice Liddle, our chair, and Eliot Lyne, our chief executive, and we'll go through and we'll have contributions obviously from different members of our senior leadership team where appropriate. So with regards to the formal business, we're going to go through the resolutions and I shall read them out one by one. So resolution 1 is to confirm minutes of AGM held on the 7th of November 2024. So that's last year's AGM. Resolution 2 is to receive the report of council and approve the report and audited financial statements for the year ending 31st of March 2025. So I'm going to hand over to our treasurer, Lindsay Whiteman, for a presentation of the finances. Lindsay.
Thank you, Patrick. In support of Resolution 2, I would like to summarise the accounts for the year to 31st of March 2025. Starting with income for the year was 9.4 million, an increase on the previous year of 1.2 million. This increase is largely attributable to the increase in donations and appeals income, as well as increases in grant and contract income. Income from membership subscriptions also rose by 65,000 during the year, taking total membership income to 890,000. Grant income of 2.6 million was received during the year, an increase of 458,000 on the previous year. Other income totaled 1.6 million and included the Trust's first nutrient neutrality payment for the sale of nutrient credits. The Trust received legacy income of 1.2 million during the year. We are extremely grateful for this, the majority of which has been designated to fulfil long-term strategic objectives. The incredible financial support from the public allows us to continue our work, and we really appreciate this. Expenditure for the year to the 31st of March 2025 was 8.7 million. This included spend on charitable activities of 5.3 million. The cost of raising funds through charitable activities totaled 1.7 million. This means that for every £1 spent by the Trust, 81 pence directly related to charitable activities, which is comparable to other charities of a similar size. The result for the year was a net surplus of 584,000. With regards to the subsidiaries, Norfolk Wildlife Services saw a decrease in turnover of 84,000 and generated a small loss of 3,000. Norfolk Wildlife Enterprises saw an increase in turnover and delivered a gross profit, but due to the continued impacts of the cost of living crisis and increases in staff costs, reported a loss of 235,000. We are determined to turn around the performance of our visitor centres, and this has been a real focus during 2025-2026. It is, however, worth noting that Norfolk Wildlife Enterprises carries out the collection of various funds at the visitor centres on behalf of the Trust. For example, membership subscriptions, donations and gift-aided entry tickets. This income totalled £126,000 during the year and is included in the Trust's accounts, thereby reducing NWE's income and profit accordingly. Looking at the balance sheet, total net assets as at 31st of March 2025 totaled 26.1 million, which is an increase of 584,000 on the previous year. 15.9 million of this relates to land and property. The Trust investments were valued at 3.8 million at year end. The Trust remains in a really strong financial position and has been delivering the strategy developed in the previous year. Thank you. I'll now hand back over to Patrick.
Thank you, Lindsay. So we're back onto the resolutions and voting. So resolution 3 is to reappoint Lovewell Blake as the Trust's auditors and authorise council to determine their remuneration. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to our chair, Alice, who will explain the trustee and vice president recruitment process. Alice.
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, before we move on to resolutions 4 and 4, I thought I'd just outline that process. In line with the Charity Governance Code, we operate an open recruitment process for trustees, followed by this AGM at which members vote. Our aim is to have a diverse and inclusive board of trustees with a good balance of skills and experience to govern the trust and to meet the needs of the trust over the following year or even years. So we advertise for applicants, we shortlist and we interview. The process is overseen by our nominations group, which is chaired by an independent member, Andrew Barnes. The nominations group also manages the process of recruitment of the president, vice presidents and any ambassadors. We were delighted with the response for trustee applications this year, with 18 applications for 4 spaces. 10 applicants were shortlisted and interviewed, and 4 have been nominated by the Council of Trustees for election. Other candidates were offered the chance to stand, and Dr. Stephen Bolt has done so. The nominations group recommendations are for Greg Beaton for re-election, Matthew Bradbury, who's already been co-opted to the Board of Trustees and who, subject to tonight's vote, has been chosen by the board as the next chair, Rob Lucking for election, and Scott Pinching for re-election. Members can vote for up to 4 of the 5 candidates, including Stephen Bolt, as individuals or for the recommended candidates as a group. Going forward and with next year in mind, I'd like to stress that it's open to any member of Norfolk Wildlife Trust to apply to become a trustee. And if you're interested, may I suggest that you register your interest with our governance officer, Marion Riches, who will take things from there. May I also address a comment raised by a member on their postal ballot form. The comment said, "It's not a question, but the practice of nominations group recommending candidates is very wrong." Nothing more was said to give a clue as to the details of the concern, but we're happy to discuss this further if the relevant person wants to get in touch. The process we run at present is the best solution we have reached so far to ensure that we meet Norfolk Wildlife Trust's needs for the future, to try to secure the best skills and experience and balance of them and to meet those needs. But we are open to other thoughts. The nominations group also oversees the process of recommending to members the appointment of any vice presidents. You'll see from Resolution 5, and I'm a bit embarrassed about this bit, that I've been nominated, but I want to stress that I'm not a member of the nominations group and was not part of the nomination decision. It would, however, be an honour to be elected as a vice president if that is the outcome of tonight's members' vote. All right, Patrick, I'll hand back to you to deal with the remaining resolutions 4 and 5.
Thank you, Alice. So resolution 4 is to re-elect and elect members of Council of Trustees. So that's obviously the choices that Alice has outlined that you'll see on your ballot paper there. Resolution 5 is to approve the nomination of Alice Liddle as Vice President. So, voting is going to close after I've given a little speech, which will be about, I think I'm allowed 8 minutes. So you have 8 more minutes to go through those resolutions and consider your votes if you're voting tonight. We're now moving from the formal part of the AGM to the more informal part. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then Alice is going to talk, and then we're going to hear from Eliot, our Chief Executive. So we've got a little selection of speeches for you. Okay, so it seems like every AGM I've addressed has been against a backdrop of greater national and international gloom and jeopardy. It's so easy to become depressed by the lack of care we're taking for our unique and precious planet, our only home, and all its amazing residents, including us. The hope, the antidote, the remedy, and dare I say it, the cure, lies in each one of us taking local action to improve our neighbourhoods and the nature within it. In local practical action, however modest, we can see the results of our labours. We can see that it's worthwhile. We can see nature respond with great vim and vigour. And through our action, we become part of a community of care, as well as draw in or even inspire others to join that community of care as well. I realise that you're all here tonight because you are already taking local action, and you are already part of the community of care that is the Norfolk Wildlife Trust. So thank you. I mean this really sincerely. Thank you, everyone attending tonight, for all that you do. I also want to thank my fellow volunteers. I'm a volunteer, and NWT is sustained by the work of its volunteers, and particularly our volunteer, Alice Liddle, who has been our chair for the past 6 years and a member of the trustees for 9 years. She's not able to continue under our governance for any longer than that 9-year term. She's not a Trump or a Putin, far from it. And so she will be stepping aside tonight. So this is her final AGM, and I've only been president for a few years. Well, it seems a few years, but time's flying by. But Alice, you've been an absolute joy to work with, and you're so wise, and you do so much work for the trust behind the scenes and providing really important legal advice, but also just judicious wisdom and decisions. The role of chair is such an important job within the trust, and you've performed it brilliantly, and you've steered the trust through some rockier times and the challenges of COVID and so on, and brought it into the very exciting terrain we stand in today. I'd also just like to thank all our NWT employees, our fantastic staff, including, of course, our Chief Executive, Eliot Lyne. Everyone is working so hard at the moment and with such passion and integrity for wildlife in Norfolk. I said this last year, and I really mean it. There's never been a moment in the history of our planet where so many people care for its fate and are now starting, at least, to take action to save and restore species other than ourselves. And here's where it gets really exciting for all of us engaged in local action to restore wildlife here in Norfolk. Next year, as you know, it's Norfolk Wildlife Trust centenary. We are the nation's first wildlife trust. We've been protecting nature in our county for longer than anyone's been doing in any other county. We can be rightly proud of this, and we need to shout it from the rooftops, don't we? When we've become custodians of a piece of land and its special wildlife, we have stayed custodians of that land. We have protected it, we've enhanced it, we've made it better for wildlife, and where appropriate, we've opened it up to public enjoyment and the peaceful appreciation of nature that's so crucial for all of us. So truly, looking back, we have a history that we can be proud of. But 2026 is an amazing moment to look forward. We will properly celebrate our 100th birthday with some exciting events, and I hope you'll all be involved. You're all incredibly welcome, and I'm sure you will be, and I hope you'll enjoy the celebrations. But each centenary event is not just patting ourselves on the back. Each event has a laser-like aim. How do we engage more people and more resources in saving and restoring nature? What can we do to expand our protection of Norfolk's nature to create a wilder Norfolk for all over the next 100 years? I don't think I'm allowed to even drop hints. This is quite agonizing for me because I'm a journalist. I love spreading the news, but hopefully Eliot may give you a bit of meat later on this evening. But I do know that Eliot and his team are working incredibly hard on the most ambitious set of land acquisitions ever, alongside a programme of centenary events which will reach out and seek to involve more Norfolk people than ever, young and old and of all backgrounds. This will hopefully boost our membership to even higher historic levels. So I can't say too much yet, except that genuinely it's going to be fantastic. What I can reveal, I suppose, is what I've been doing, and this isn't to boast, but it's hopefully just to add to the excitement around next year. I mentioned at last year's AGM that I planted some acorns I collected from Foxley Wood, our largest ancient woodland, in the hope of growing 100 centenary oaks. I can exclusively reveal that we've hit our target, and we have at least 100 centenary oaks alive and well. And I'm hoping that the background's making it hard to, hang on, if I put it in front of me there, you can see they're not at their best at this time of year, but this is my star. But there's 100 of these beautiful Foxley oaks awaiting. So these oaks will be used to raise funds as gifts for community groups and local schools, and many will be planted in the new woodland that we're creating to expand Foxley. I'm sure you've noticed this year has been an epic mast year. There's acorns everywhere. So I couldn't resist. And I've been back to Foxley and collected several hundred more acorns. I'm no hero. It took me about 20 minutes. It was incredibly easy. There were just acorns absolutely everywhere. And this autumn, I'm involving local schools in helping to plant the acorns. And we hope to have even more centenary oaks by next spring, descendants of the best trees in Foxley, to celebrate 2026 and symbolise that spread of nature through Norfolk. The other thing I've managed to do this year is obtain a place in the 2026 London Marathon. So I will be dressing up as a badger and raising money for NWT and hopefully a load more awareness as well. I am 50. I last ran a marathon 18 years ago, so this is going to be a tough challenge for me. I'm incredibly excited about next year. I really hope you are too. I keep bumping into people who've got no connection with Norfolk Wildlife Trust. And when I mention our centenary, I'm really struck by their immediate understanding of and enthusiasm for our work. And I'm surprised by their offers of help. Everyone, it seems, wants to help us. There's so much goodwill out there towards what we do. And it's a challenge for staff to coordinate all that goodwill, but everyone's rising to the occasion. The centenary is our best ever chance to harness all this goodwill in our home county and bring more people with us, reviving and restoring more nature in Norfolk for everyone. Finally, I'd like to end on a personal note. My dad, John, died 2 weeks ago. Some of you may remember him because he was chair of NWT back in the late 80s and early 90s. He was among the panel who appointed Brendan Joyce as chief executive. And as an ecologist, he played a key role in NWT acquiring Foxley Wood. A week before he died, I told him about NWT's plans at Foxley and some exciting potential actions in the wider region, and he was totally thrilled. Life is short. Let's do what we can while we can. We are all here tonight for the same reason, to help nature in Norfolk, and in so doing, help everyone who lives here. I hope we can all join in next year, and each of us, through our small deeds, undertaken collectively, set in motion more things that will blossom and bear fruit and grow. Together, we can make our still wonderful, still wildlife-rich county even more wonderful and even more wildlife rich in the century to come. Thank you. So I am going to now announce that voting has closed. So I hope you've all managed to vote online, those of you who needed to do so. I know we've had a lot of votes in advance as well. So thank you again, everyone, for your participation in the voting process, in the democratic process. I should just say as well, I should have said this at the start, that we have a chat facility. And so and we will be having a Q&A in a bit. But as things arise or pop into your head, please do. You're very welcome to put questions for anyone or comments in the chat, and we'll try and get through those as the evening moves on. I'd like to hand over to Alice, our outgoing chair now, who's got a speech for you and is going to tell you all about what's been happening. Alice, thank you.
Well, thank you, Patrick. And I met your dad, John, a few times, and I mean, it was so evident from when we were talking. He had such a deep interest in and love for Norfolk Wildlife Trust. And the Trust has such a lot to thank him for, and we will be paying tribute to him over the coming weeks. So that's lovely.
Thank you.
The usual remit for the Chair's address at the AGM is to look back over the latest financial year, so April 2024 to March 25. But I'm not going to be able to resist straying outside that timescale a couple of times to mention a couple of highlights. Here's our impact report for the year. I think you've all seen it. Oh, can you see it? Or is it covered by background? Our year for wildlife. There's so much to celebrate recorded in it, and some of the standout moments we've had have been truly innovative. One of the most significant moments of the year was the opening of Sweetbriar Marshes in May 2024. I remember when the possibility of buying Sweetbriar Marshes came before the trustees about 4 or 5 years ago, and there was quite a deep reluctance on some people's part to commit money, time and effort to what they thought would be a huge challenge in the shape of a large nature reserve in an urban environment. But I'm so pleased that the majority view prevailed. Sweetbriar places the communities of Norwich at its heart, and we've laid it out with accessibility at its core, winning a design award for doing so. And stop press. Only last week we completed the acquisition of a small piece of neighbouring land and achieved planning permission, which will result in increased facilities for people with accessibility needs, get the school children in by way of coaches, we'll be able to create a changing places toilet, and we'll be able to do some further work for the nature reserve itself. In the words of the Trust Director of Engagement, all this will enhance the vision to make Sweetbriar Marshes a truly community-centred, inclusive and accessible nature reserve where wildlife thrives and everyone can experience, connect with and be inspired to care for nature. A similar "do we really want to do that" conversation at a trustee council meeting happened when the idea of buying a pub and its land arose. The answer was a resounding yes. So the Pleasure Boat Inn at Hickling opened its doors in August 2024 and has been very successful in welcoming more people to wildlife wonders in this very special Broads landscape. But the Trust has also created more room for nature in more conventional ways. 2 purchases of additional land at Foxley Wood have added 40 hectares to it, increasing it by 1/3. We've restored wetlands in West Norfolk. We've created more room for pool frogs and rare aquatic plants at Thompson Common in the Brecks. Spoonbills bred successfully the second year at Hickling, and we're very much hoping that this shows that a breeding colony is now established. And I shouldn't mention it because it's only happened this summer, but I can't resist reminding you of the successful breeding by an osprey pair of at least 2 chicks at Ranworth, the first ospreys to breed in East Anglia for centuries. I've just outlined some examples towards realising the first outcome of the Trust strategy, to achieve abundant and thriving nature. Just as important is the second outcome, which is to see people valuing nature. Membership numbers increased by 3% during the year. And another stop press moment. In September this year, the number of members topped the 40,000 mark for the first time. Sweetbriar Marshes has proved vital to community engagement, hosting some 83 free events, allied with which has been our Next Door Nature project, bringing local people and organisations together in northwest Norwich. We continue our work with school children and young people. Nearly 5,000 children were engaged with nature in classrooms, school grounds, and on our nature reserves, and nearly 1,300 young people up to the age of 25 connected to nature through one of our Wild Youth Action Programme activities. We're also resolute in our aim to develop a strong youth voice, and I'm excited to see how the members of our new Youth Forum will help shape the future for Norfolk's wildlife. The third outcome of the strategy is to be leaders for nature, ensuring that we are an influential, resilient and collaborative organisation. We continue to speak up for nature and strive to lead from the front. Since the proposal for the Norwich Western Link emerged, we, along with other conservation organisations, experts and individuals, consistently campaigned to highlight the damage that the road would cause if the planning application for its construction was successful. The County Council withdrew its application in early 2024, and the hope is that this very special area of the Wensel Valley will remain undisturbed, not only for the largest colony of barbastelle bats in Britain, but for all the other wonderful wildlife it contains. In the run-up to the 2024 general election, we produced a plan for Norfolk's nature, setting out key priorities and actions we wanted to see the new government to take. The message for this and similar initiatives which continue is simple: restore nature now. We strengthened our collaboration to work with others to improve the condition of the very special areas for nature that are our county wildlife sites. We've launched a species recovery framework which relies on a collaborative approach with others, and have formed a partnership with the University of East Anglia for research, knowledge exchange and skills development for students and staff. Being leaders for nature means that we need also to be resilient. We continue to work through the transformation of our processes, embedding further the implementation of the finance system introduced in early 2024, and we're currently focusing on our IT and digital infrastructure. We also need financial resilience and continue to invest our efforts in income generation. We're fortunate to have the support of so many members and corporate supporters. We could not do what we do, nor achieve the successes we have, without you, without the support of our many members, donors, grant providers, investors, volunteers, and other supporters. Thank you. And thank you too to the whole of the expert, dedicated staff within the Trust. All of you make a difference for Norfolk's wildlife and wild spaces and the people connecting with them. And like Patrick, I'm going to end on a personal note. Patrick mentioned it, but my 9 years is up. My time is up. Those 9 years seem to have passed in a flash. 6 of those years have been as chair as well as a trustee. When I joined the Board of Trustees in late 2016, Brendan Joyce was the chief executor, and at the forefront of his efforts at the time was the purchase of the northern half of what is now our Hickling Nature Reserve. I remember it well when Brendan practically locked up me and another trustee, Garth Inman, up in his office with huge piles of documents, immense piles of documents, I remember, issuing the directive that we were to go through everything and prepare a report and recommendation to the Board of Trustees. It was a bit of a baptism of fire. I was chosen by the other trustees to take up the position of chair in late 2019, and very soon after that we were faced with the pandemic. Unforeseen and difficult times followed, but the Trust won through. Fortunately, things had settled by autumn 2021, which is when Eliot Lyne joined as chief executive, and embarked on realising the Trust's mission to create more space for nature to thrive and inspire more people to take action for nature. And it's working. Just see where we are now. It's been such a privilege to have helped lead the Trust and see it grow from strength to strength. It's been such a privilege to have worked with such expert and dedicated people. And I wish the Trust all the best in its continuing commitment to achieve a wilder Norfolk for all. Thank you, and may I now hand over to Eliot, who'll outline what's coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And I'm going to give you a few minutes now on the future, the things that we're doing this year and beyond. And Alice has just given you an excellent overview of the last year, and my role is to look forwards. But I do want to pay tribute to Alice. As she said, she is having to leave the board and has been a fantastic trustee and chair for us over the last 9 years. And I just want to read to you a message I got this week from a member, which says, as a member of Norfolk Wildlife Trust, and there are many, many of us, we want to express our heartfelt thanks to Alice Liddle for her time as chair. We have appreciated her unstinting commitment to the ongoing achievements of Norfolk Wildlife Trust, as well as her warmth and candour. Alice, thank you. And I think that that highlights exactly who Alice is and has been and will be. I'm sure she'll be close to us still, hopefully, as Vice President. And I want to extend my personal thanks for her giving me the opportunity and the honour of leading this organisation. And from the organisation for her unstinting commitment is a great phrase, actually. I feel as though I can pick up the phone to Alice at any time, and have done many times, to seek wise counsel for things I'm struggling with or questions I've got, or just to have a little bit of a rant when I'm having a bad day. And it's been an absolute joy to work with you, Alice, and a real privilege to learn from you. So thank you. So you notice, I'm moving on to the presentation now. So you'll notice, as I did last year, I'm featuring some images from our 2026 calendar in my presentation. And there's this is May, and all of these have been taken in a photo competition that we got hundreds of entries to, and you can buy one of these calendars in a Norfolk Wildlife Trust visitor centre near you, along with which you will find a fine selection of Christmas cards and gifts for the festive season. So do go along to one of our centres and purchase one of these wonderful calendars, awesome cards. So what I'm going to do is to bring out highlights from this year so far and take a look further forward. So I'm going to start with outcome 1 in the same way that Alice did with our strategy, which is about creating abundant and thriving nature. And with this in particular, looking at how we plan to improve, expand and connect nature. So starting with improving what we already have. The first, so we continue as ever to manage our nature reserves. So we have over 5,100 hectares now of land, one of the largest wildlife trust estates in the country. And we're going to continue to manage it with the dedication that we have done for the last 99 years. We've got a fantastic team that does this day in, day out, week in, week out, no matter what the weather. We're also challenging ourselves about how we're doing this, how we can be more effective and efficient in the way we do this, responding to new technological developments. Some personal highlights of the year for me. The ospreys at Ranworth in the top right-hand corner there, a wonderful achievement. And that isn't just the fact that ospreys have decided to nest here. This is probably 15 to 20 years of planning and dedication and projects to make sure that the habitat is right for this incredible species. And it was a fantastic draw this summer at Ranworth, and we had hundreds more visitors than we would usually have had who got to experience that wonderful site. You'll also see a picture of some painstaking monitoring work that we're doing across our estate now, and this one is Upton. And also a picture of the wilder hickling. So Alice mentioned the incredible acquisition we did in 2017 of the estate, half of the estate at Hickling that we didn't own. And now we're really on the verge now of bringing that to life. So we have a new project, a really ambitious new project to provide environmental benefit, climate change adaptation, and social and economic benefit around our estate at Hickling that's really taking shape. And significant fundraising bids have been written and are about to go in. So it's a really exciting time for that estate. So as well as improving what we have, we also need to expand the space for nature. And this next slide really looks, again, a couple of the things that Alice has talked about, but bringing to life the Foxley Wood expansion. It's incredibly exciting that we've brought to life the first expansion, the first significant expansion of Norfolk's largest ancient woodland for 950 years. And I know this is something that's incredibly dear to Patrick's heart and the work that his father did, for whom we will be forever grateful. But we've done it in quite an innovative way, utilising something called nutrient neutrality credits through Natural England. This is using private finance to fund the nature's expansion. And we're planning, as you see on the far right-hand side there, in this ex-arable land, a mix of woodland expansion and the woodland spilling over into this new land. Native planting using saplings, as Patrick has mentioned, grown from Foxley Wood, and some natural regeneration, some open spaces, so a real mix of habitat that we're looking to create over the next decades, really. We'll also, as you see in the bottom couple of images, just announced about 2 weeks ago the purchase of Sottshole Broad, which is right next to Fairhaven Gardens in the Broads near South Walsham. And it's a wonderful little site. There's really a pocket side. It's a pocket Broads in miniature. So you have a beautiful small Broad there in the picture on the left-hand side. You have some wonderful wet woodland. You have some bluebell wood, some mature woodland. So a real variety of habitats, and some at the top there, some dry grassland. So it's a really exciting site and provide a really interesting opportunity for people who go to Ranworth to see something different in our estate. But we know that and the thing that Patrick teed me up to mention, I mustn't forget to mention this. We have some really exciting plans in the pipeline, and I don't want to jinx them at this point by being too specific. If you're eagle-eyed and you look in the wall behind me, you'll see some plans of things that are being brewed. So we've got about 400 hectares of land acquisition in the pipeline, and we're really hoping that some of that will come to fruition early in the new year. But again, I don't want to jinx it too much, but look out for some good news there. We also know that we cannot turn nature's fortunes around alone by managing land. So we have to work with others, which is why our Connect theme is so crucial. And I'm delighted that we've started work again on a really ambitious programme, a 25-year vision in the Claylands area of South Norfolk. You'll recall a couple of years ago we did a really exciting project that got a lot of engagement, and now we're really expanding that into this landscape. And we've done some community engagement work. We've had over 500 responses to a survey. We've had some face-to-face discussions. We're going to have a launch in the new year, and a range of exciting activities to really co-develop and co-design in this really amazing landscape a vision for that land. And it's a particularly important time for the South Norfolk, because there are a huge amount of pressures from not just the pylon route potentially going through, but an inordinate amount of solar farm applications, which are nationally significant infrastructure projects, so really challenging to influence. So what we're trying to do here is to influence as much as we can, recognizing that actually some of these things may happen because we have a limited ability to prevent. But actually, how can we make the best of that for nature? We're also developing an integrated advisory offer to bring all of our skills that we've developed over the 99 years to be able to be utilised by other farmers and landowners. So that's a very exciting development. So moving on to outcome 2, I've picked out some of my personal favourites here. The opening of Sweetbriar Marshes Alice has mentioned. We're now on to phase 2. So that image right at the bottom there is of the land that Alice mentioned that we've just bought. We've got some fantastic new funding from Aviva and for the Greater Norwich Growth Board, which is a collaboration of local authorities. But I'm also delighted that we've got a new project looking at expanding nature across Norwich. So this Nature City Norwich project, which is being led by Norwich City Council in partnership with Broadland and South Norfolk, Norfolk County Council, and we are project managing and providing all the community engagement work. So we've just recruited some fantastic new staff and will be doing that piece of work for the next few years. So really exciting, showing that owning land can be the real springboard for developing presence and impact across the urban environment. So now moving on to the next slide, which is around young people. So it's one of my most proud things, I think, over the last 4 years in the organisation has been developing. I mean, I haven't done this, our amazing team in the engagement team have done this, but that sort of championing the work we're doing with young people. So we've mentioned our Wild Youth Action, our Wilder Wardens, our Youth Forum, managing their own nature reserve. And now really excitingly, we are working on plans for a youth advisory board, which will be the connection between that young people's voice and our board of governance. So really influencing the heart of how we run and govern the organisation. And also delivering really exciting and expanding work experience opportunities for young people. And just a lovely quote in the bottom right-hand corner there, which says, just a note to say thank you so much for Robin's amazing work experience week. He had a ball. Off the back of the week, he is hoping to change his college course to do environmental conservation and continue volunteering, testament to a brilliant week. So really kind of impacting, the career opportunities and the career desires of that young person. Really exciting that we're able to do that. So moving on now on to outcome 3, which is building our capacity to be a leader for nature. We know, as Patrick said, that the world is volatile at the moment. There's an awful lot of quite volatile policy and politics at the moment. We've got the impact of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which is, going back now to the House of Commons over the next 3 weeks, which has quite significant potential impact on how development will happen in the wider landscape. So we are campaigning hard against some elements of that bill. There's quite a lot of damaging government rhetoric, which we think is really damaging our opportunity to say that actually nature and development can work in conjunction with each other. Nature can be and is a driver of economic development, of our prosperity, of everything it is that's great about Norfolk. And potentially more damaging, a retreat from political consensus on climate change, which is hugely damaging for nature. And we need to really press home that message that climate change, climate and nature are two sides of the same coin. If climate change risks accelerate, the impact on nature will be significant. But having said all of that, I think there are real opportunities. I've today been at the launch of Norfolk and Suffolk's local nature recovery strategy, and the energy in the room was palpable, that energy to actually get on and do something now, to make a difference. That was from local authorities, it was from organisations like ours, it was from communities, it was from farmers and landowners. So there is a desire, despite government, to get on with making things happen. And with the devolution of local government, I think there's an opportunity to influence a new generation of leaders to say nature is something that makes Norfolk special, and we should really shout about that. So there are also some opportunities, and we will be there making those cases when these changes happen. So whilst external influence is really important, we're also focusing internally on who we are and how we show up. So my final focus really is on our new values. So we've spent a lot of time working with staff, with volunteers, with talking to our various audiences around, who we are as an organisation, how we show up in the world. So this is really about things that will help guide our decision making. They'll help others understand what we're all about. They'll shape our culture. They'll bring a shared purpose. So I won't read them out, but that sense of us being welcoming, of us connecting people and nature, and connecting nature, in being active, in delivering, being courageous, in learning, so innovating and improving, being curious, challenging ourselves, but also now celebrating. In a sometimes challenging world, we need to inspire hope and wonder by celebrating what's amazing about the place that we call home. And so finally, I want to give you a sneak preview of some of our centenary plans. As Patrick has said, the centenary is a real opportunity for us to both look backwards and look forward. So our theme for the centenary is 100 years of trust and 100 years of hope. We're proud to be the first wildlife trust to hit this incredible landmark, and we know nature is in trouble, but there's lots of work ahead. And the sentiment is purposefully positive and forward-looking. We aim to engender a feeling of hope and action in order to maximise engagement with NWT, with Norfolk Wildlife Trust, during this significant year. So 100 years of trust speaks to our past. It reflects the trust people have and have put into us to care for Norfolk's nature over the past 99 years. It recognises the trust that we've earned, from how we've changed the fortunes of our county's wildlife to the heroes along the way who have made this possible. But 100 Years of Hope looks to our future. It celebrates the skills, experience and knowledge we have built and our ambitions to work together to create a wilder Norfolk for all, as we look confidently towards another 100 years of protecting and restoring Norfolk's nature. And so I'm going to now look at some of the highlights from the events, from the fundraising and from the engagement plans, to give you a bit of a sneak preview of things that we're planning. So firstly, to the event. So I'm not going to go through all of this, and these slides will be available on the website. You know, we've got some really exciting guest speakers. We're showing up at the Science Festival. We're planning a wild weekend, a family weekend at Clyde, Hickling and Sweetbriar in May and June. We'll obviously be at the Norfolk Show. But we'll be out and about in your community as well. We're looking at a touring photo exhibition and providing local groups with opportunities and fundraising activities throughout the year. And also, following feedback, we're looking to have a face-to-face and online AGM next year. So Saturday, the 7th of November 2026. Please save the date. Likely to be, we're trying to do it at Clyde. That's our ambition. So looking to obviously go to where we started at Clyde and have our celebration AGM. And there may be some cake involved, I think, at that time. So moving now on to some of the fundraising opportunities. As Patrick has said, his incredible tree nursery that he's nurturing will be brought into action. We're delighted to have Bishop's Open Garden in Norwich, who's hugely supportive of what we do, Bishop of Norwich. Our Foxley Summer event, which will be a bigger and better than last year in July for all of our wider stakeholders. And we're looking to engage with some key corporate organisations in Norfolk to become centenary partners, to join us on that journey. We have a wide variety of mainly alcoholic, actually, centenary products. I'm sure there are non-alcoholic ones as well, but Woodford's, Chet Valley, some wonderful centenary products, and not to mention a centenary fundraising appeal, of obviously probably linked to some of the exciting things I haven't mentioned. A centenary book of Nick Atchison's amazing articles in Norfolk Magazine, and our president obviously will be running as a badger in London Marathon. I was tempted to come out of my marathon retirement and do the same, but actually I think what I'll probably do is some form of, oh, I'm committing to something here, aren't I? Some form of Marriott's Way related long run that connects Foxley and Sweetbriar and those kind of things, probably later in the year once I'm a little bit fitter. So now moving on to engagement activities. Finally, we have centenary film, we have some centenary branding, and we're developing these case studies, and you'll see a special centenary edition of Turn in March. The photography competition will be bigger and better. And we're encouraging people to take action, to do one thing for wildlife, to really encourage people to do that thing that will make a difference. And we'll obviously have a volunteer thank you event as well. So I can't believe how many times I've said the word centenary in the last 3 minutes. So that gives you a sense of the celebratory nature, but also this isn't about us. This is about what we do, who we are, and who we want to be for the next 100 years. So finally, although our political picture is currently challenging and broader world trends feel like they may be overwhelming at times, I take solace from the fact that if enough people act, then politics will follow. And we will be around long after any particular politician or government or current sort of flavour of the month politics will be gone. Finally, as ever, we couldn't do any of this without you, our members and supporters. We are hugely thankful for the support that we currently have and that hopefully we will have into the future. And we know that we, together with others, can and will turn the corner for nature's recovery in Norfolk and create a county where nature is abundant and thriving and valued. So I'd like to close by thanking you all for being here, and I'll now hand back to Patrick.
Thank you, Eliot. Thank you for a brilliant address there. And I have to say, that was rammed full of content. There's so much to digest there, isn't there? I'm sure you all at home, like me, are kind of going, right, okay, there's this, there's so much going on. It's really exciting and very dynamic time to be involved with NWT. Right, it is results time. The results are in. So I'm going to read through the voting on all the resolutions. The full results will be published on NWT's website, of course, so you will be able to see them in detail there after the AGM. So, Resolution 1, to confirm the minutes of the annual general meeting held on the 7th of November 2024. It won't surprise you that that has passed with 916 votes in favour and none against. Resolution 2, to receive the report of council and approve the report and audited financial statements for the year ending 31st of March 2025. That resolution is also passed with 928 votes for, 2 votes against. And Resolution 3, to reappoint Lovewell Blake as the Trust's auditors and authorise council to determine their remuneration. And that has been passed for with 908 votes, 19 against. So Resolution 4 is the big one because that's the election and re-election of members of council. So I'm going to read through the votes given to each candidate in order of in the order that they just appear in front of me. But Greg Beaton, standing for re-election, 854 votes. Matthew Bradbury, standing for election, 892 votes. Rob Lucking, standing for election, 860 votes. Scott Pinching, standing for re-election, 846 votes. Dr. Stephen Bolt, standing for election, 155 votes. So what that means is that the top 4 are elected to council. So that's Greg Beaton, Matthew Bradbury, Rob Lucking, and Scott Pinching. Congratulations to you 4. And thank you very much, everyone, for participating. I must say the voting numbers are very impressive this year, really substantial. Resolution 5, to approve the nomination of Alice Liddle as Vice President. And that's been hugely approved with 923 votes for. Congratulations, Alice. Right, so, and just to repeat, all the full details will be published on our website. So we're now going to fairly quickly, because we are running slightly behind, Alice and Eliot and others on the NWT team are going to answer some questions that have come in from members. We have also got a few questions asked this evening as well, so we'll try and get to those too. We'll try and whiz through these fairly quickly because we don't want to end up running too late. But and I'm just going to read out the questions. This one's raised by Diane Wilson, and she says, may I suggest a name board with breed of cattle at Sweetbriar? I think they are White Park cattle. Also seem Belted Galloway and Dexters, she thinks. Not sure how far the reserve stretches. So I don't know if we have an answer for that one.
We do have an answer. It's not, and I'll read it out. We've obviously asked for help in the responding to questions that have been submitted in advance. But the answer to this one is that we've got much more interpretation and signage for Sweetbriar Marshes coming up. It's underway, and it will include the information on the cattle. We expect it to be everything on site in spring next year.
Thank you, Alice. A question from Richard Leake. Are there plans to expand working with local schools to secondary schools? That's 11 to 16-year-olds.
Shall I deal with that one too?
I can take that if you want, Alice.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. So yes, we've got a new youth engagement program which is specifically targeted 11 to 25-year-olds. Excuse me. So we're very keen to expand our offer at the moment to increase engagement with secondary schools. We're doing a primary school wilder schools program, and we're currently hoping to pilot that with secondary schools, and are currently in conversations with a couple of schools to explore this at the moment. we will need to build capacity in our teams to do that. So we're kind of planning ahead, I think, in this regard. So we're not doing it at the moment, but we're planning to try and pilot that with secondary schools in the future.
Thank you, Eliot. Question here from Dale Heaton. I volunteer for NWT and I'm deeply impressed by the young, dedicated and hardworking staff I meet. I know that some are on short-term contracts, which to me seems a loss of dedication as well as difficulties for the person. Is there a move away from this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we moved quite significantly away from this 2 or 3 years ago. So far fewer short-term contracts than we had 4 or 5 years ago. The main reasons why we would have a short-term contract at this point is if a role is short-term funded, so there's a specific project role that's funded for a period of time, we align the contract to that, which is standard practice. Although we do in every circumstance try to take that person on, and we're always looking at how we do that. And we also have seasonal contracts for some of our seasonal visitor centres. So some of our visitor centres are only open in the summer season, and we have a seasonal contract for those people. So there are generally only those 2 circumstances where we have short-term contracts. Everyone else has been put onto a permanent contract in the organisation.
Thank you, Eliot. A question raised by Denise Back. What proportion of Norfolk Wildlife Trust members support the Trust's stand on opposition to the Norwich Western Link Road?
I'll pick this one up because we've had a look at the figures from what we can ascertain. Approximately 5,000 people lodged objections to the road during the planning process, and approximately 1,100 used Norfolk Wildlife Trust e-action to do that. This data is now in our own system, and we've cross-referenced it against membership. We know there's nearly 450, 500 members who took objection. Obviously, some of our members could have gone directly to the planning portal rather than coming through us and our e-action approach. At the time, we had 21,000 memberships, and it's only about 2,000 of our members that we can track that took the action. But it doesn't mean that others didn't agree with our stance. It's just they did. We don't know what they did. We didn't. Having said all that, we didn't have a particularly high number of membership resignations or grumbles about the action we were taking, and
Thanks, Alice.
it has been successful.
Yeah, thank you. And Elizabeth Nobbs asks, are there plans to provide charging points for cars at major reserves?
Yes, we've done that at Hickling. We've recently been able to install electric charging points at the Hickling Stave, and we're actively exploring the possibilities of further charging points at other sites subject to funding. So generally, we have to make sure that we can get funding to install and maintain, and obviously in some of our more remote locations that there's a sufficient electricity supply, which is often one of the barriers. But we're on the case with this one and are working to bring more ambition, I think, to our net zero strategy at the moment.
Thank you, Eliot. Now, we have had some questions come in live tonight, so I am keen to get to these because that's the kind of point of having a open AGM like this one. So Mark Collins asks, navigation on Hickling Broad has been limited for many years in order to protect stoneworts. The plants have been very successful and have spread widely. Would NWT now support increased access for private boaters who would like to observe nature from the water and enjoy wider sailing facilities on the Broad?
I can take that one. Thanks, Mark. This is a perennial question I think we have. It's a complicated conversation, this one. One of the things we try and do is to make sure we're balancing the needs of nature and leisure at Hickling. In that, we know that we're probably not going to please everyone. And I think this can be a divisive conversation. We're keen to try and make it not so. We know at Hickling that the Broads Authority are responsible for cutting and dredging the main channel, which is a quite significant channel through the middle of Hickling Broad. And they received and had a discussion recently around whether they would extend that, and they decided not to. They didn't see the evidence to do that, and I think the evidence is not supported that the nature would not be harmed by that kind of action, and they simply don't have the money to do that either. We're trying to work in partnership with the Broads Authority and Natural England. So our view currently is that there's not the evidence to support wider cutting. We are actively, though, working on our Hickling Vision project to work out how we balance leisure pursuits on the Broad with the nature that we're trying to protect. So this is always a conversation I think that will happen, and we're trying to find that balance, accepting that not everyone will be happy with where we land.
Thanks, Eliot. Just another question on the Hickling. We are running late, so I don't know. I know these are big, meaty questions. If we can be fairly quick with a response. This is from Matthew Ling, and he says the phrase wilder Hickling seems slightly contradictory in the context of creating a boardwalk in Reed Marsh and damaging the habitat. Equally significantly, increasing the footfall at the reserve will have a deleterious impact on transport movements locally and impact on the wildlife. What action will be taken to reduce these impacts?
I mean, I'll take it very quickly, and I think we could probably provide a bigger written response to this one. I think this, that isn't what we're trying to do at the Wilder Hickling. We've had there's a lot in this. There's a lot of things we're doing at Hickling, and everything we do will be making sure that we're not damaging habitat, and we're getting that balance between allowing people to connect with nature, connecting nature with new audiences, particularly at the Stave, and making sure we're making the reserve adapted to climate change, because we know that climate change will change that reserve. So there's a lot to talk about here. There's a lot of proposals. So I would suggest we maybe put a broader answer to that one up on the website, so I can go through all of the proposals to make sure that, and I don't think the results will be as the gentleman has suggested, and we're very concerned that we do things in the right way.
Thanks, Eliot. There's a really interesting comment here from and question from Belinda Clark. It's a point I hadn't previously considered. So Belinda says it would be really great for the trust to have impact metrics about parameters such as year-on-year increased biodiversity on its reserves, carbon sequestration, water quality, enhanced pollinators, etc. I know this is super tough, but landowners across England are having to work out how to do this, and it would be so powerful for the trust to have hard data around its outcomes in addition to the outputs. Land acquisition is really an output, but getting a handle on how the trust's work delivers real tangible value for nature across a range of metrics on its land would be excellent. A balanced scorecard across your reserves would also enable you to benchmark the wildlife benefit performance of each reserve and help balance the visitor footprint conversation agenda in a really informed way. Interesting point.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. I was wondering if Kevin could, if we can get Kevin to answer that one.
Yeah, happy to do that. So we do have a monitoring framework which we've been working on across our owned and managed estate for quite a few years now. As you say, it is super tough. It's a real challenge because you could throw endless amounts of money to monitor everything that we have, but we have worked out a program. We've piloted it at 7 sites at the moment, and we're just going through a review process because it's become very clear at those 7 sites that to do that across our whole 5,000 plus hectares is just unfeasible in terms of the economics of it. So we're refining it down, and we are trying to hit those points that you make about measuring, in particular, how biodiversity changes, the impacts that we're having with the work that we do on our sites. Things like condition assessments, using Natural England's favourable condition tables across all of our sites, breeding bird surveys, invertebrate surveys, picking out particularly vulnerable or endangered species. So we do have that programme, and it's rolling out now. So we're hopeful over a number of years we'll start to deliver that data.
Thanks, Kevin. That's great. One very quick final question, and that is from Carolyn Robinson. Would it be possible to bring some of the talks and activities that happen in Clyde closer to Norwich? It's a long way to travel from South Norfolk to Clyde. You're certainly right there, Carolyn.
I think I think we can certainly bear that in mind. And I think in our centenary programme, what we're trying to do is to try and get a balance around the county. We have been, Clyde is somewhat special in our centenary focus because that's where we started. But I think we're really focused, or I'm certainly really focused because I live in South Norfolk, about having more things in South Norfolk in particular. So I think it's an ongoing conversation about how we balance those audiences. And we've got a member of staff now looking at our entire programme of events to make sure it sort of hangs together as a holistic programme, which will look at themes and geography and those other kind of things. So hopefully we can address that point in time.
Thank you, Eliot, and thank you for, sorry, I've really raced through those questions there. There's again, like I said, there's a lot of content here tonight. So we're running slightly late, but I'm very conscious it would be good for everyone to have a very quick break. So we're going to have a really quick break and we're going to come back here at 7:15 on the dot. So you've got 5 minutes off to have a comfort break, get a cup of tea, put your feet up, and then we'll come back with the highlight of tonight, which is the power of nature for all. And our brilliant panel will be discussing this question. See you in a few minutes. Right, I think it's 7:15. So according to our timetable, I think we should get going again. I hope everyone at home has managed to have a cup of tea, have a little break, because it's certainly an intense evening with a lot of fascinating information. Thanks very much, Eliot and Alice and Kevin, for your answers to those questions. I know we sped through them, but as Eliot explained, he'll email out some fuller answers where required there. So our next section of the AGM is, of course, the highlight. It's the panel discussion, the power of nature for all. And I'm really delighted, obviously, to welcome our brilliant ambassador, Nick Atchison. He's going to lead this discussion. I know it's a subject very close to his heart. And with Nick are Sarah, our friends Sarah and David, and of course, Ellie too. So thank you all four of you. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll listen with interest. Oh, I should just say, sorry, quickly, anyone at home who has questions or comments, please put them in the chat function and we will go through as many as we can at the end of the discussion. Over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and a very warm good evening from me and from us to all of you in attendance. I think probably the best thing, rather than me trying to introduce all of you, why don't you give yourselves an introduction and explain what your roles are? Shall we start with you, Sarah, if you would?
Yeah, of course. So hello, everyone. Hope you're having a lovely evening. I'm Sarah Lapinova, and I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Officer here at the Norfolk Wildlife Trust.
Thanks, Sarah. And Ellie?
Hey, I'm Ellie Leach. I have been working at the British Trust for Ornithology for the last 20-something years, and I'm currently head of the ringing and nest recording schemes.
And Dave?
Evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Dave Schrager, Chair for Inclusive Norwich. It's a charity that campaigns to improve accessibility and inclusion for anyone with a disability in and around Norwich. And I say around because I've done work for Norfolk Wildlife Trust as far as Cly and various other organizations across Norfolk. So yes, in and around Norwich.
Thank you very much, Dave. You're all most welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. The title of our discussion is The Power of Nature for All, which reminds me of the title of our strategy at Norfolk Wildlife Trust, A Wilder Norfolk for All, which came out now a couple of years ago. And in that context, I wonder what you think the benefits are of inclusion, the benefits of giving everyone equitable access to nature, what they are for nature. There's abundant evidence that nature is good for us. How do we then argue that being more inclusive is good for nature? Ellie, can I start with you?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nick. I think from wearing my BTO hat, all our data collection is basically done by the volunteers, and really nature is in trouble, as Eliot was saying earlier. We're doing amazing things to help NWT and BTO. We're doing amazing things to help And the more people who are contributing to that, the better, simply. So, the more people that can get involved and feel that connection, which will influence, their everyday lives, how they vote, things like that, the better.
Brilliant. Thank you. Dave, over to you.
Yeah, so 30% of the population is made up of people with disabilities, and having mobility impairment makes it quite difficult to access. It can make it difficult to access a wild area, and without that access, there's no feeling of ownership. There's no feeling of understanding. And I don't think it's simply a matter of how it benefits nature. I think it's quite a reciprocal relationship, especially for anyone with disability. Health issues are at the forefront of our mind quite often. And so I think we all understand that, the health benefits you get from nature, the nature fix, are so impressive and so vital that having access to nature benefits us so much that it's in our interest to feel that ownership, to get that benefit, and therefore to care for nature, to make sure that the environment is considered and maintained and conserved.
Thank you, Dave. And Sarah, in your role at Norfolk Wildlife Trust, how do you answer this question?
Yeah, so I massively agree with Ellie and Dave, and I'm just such a huge believer that in order for anything in life to thrive, it needs to be loved. And as humans, we care for things that we have a sentimental value towards. But how can nature be loved, and how can it thrive if not everyone feels welcome in it, and if not everyone has the same access to develop this relationship towards it in the first place, maybe from a younger age. So I think it creates this like catch-22 situation where there are a lot of gatekeepers who feel a sense of ownership of these wild places, but it will only hinder it in the long term, because if people don't feel welcome in these spaces, then why would they like spend their precious time and money and resources caring for them if they don't feel a part of them? So the reality is that like nature needs to be taken care of by everyone because it's in everyone's interest. That's the only way that we can now move forward. So we need that equal access for people to be able to care for it in a way that suits them, in a way that speaks to them. And that's going to look so different to everyone as well, which is also the beauty of it, that the more people, then there's more avenues for people to be like looking after nature in like a myriad of ways.
Thanks, Sarah. It's fascinating, isn't it, that as naturalist conservationists, we celebrate biodiversity, and yet there are all kinds of limiting factors preventing the diversity of humanity having access to nature in an equitable way. Have any of you either in your professional roles or your personal lives, in a natural space or a nature-related forum, have you experienced barriers yourselves or witnessed people who are close to you experiencing barriers? Dave, you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, I'm a wheelchair user. So before, it's quite interesting. We've spoken a lot about Sweetbriar Marsh a lot this evening, and Inclusive Norwich had quite a big role in helping and working with Norfolk Wildlife Trust to make that available for everyone. But when at the very first meeting with Denzel, the lovely Denzel, my chair, the battery wasn't working on it, and I had to go along in a manual wheelchair, and there was literally no paths, and it was a cold, wet time of the year. I can't remember if it was late or early in the year. And dear old Denzel had to build up quite a sweat, pushing me around through the mud and we had great fun, but it was very hard for both of us, and we couldn't get to all of the places that he wanted to show me that needed work done, and so we weren't able to really do the full assessment. And so that was quite a realization of what needed to be done, and the challenges that just for myself that I faced. I see that obviously quite often in my professional role as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Sarah, what about in your role?
Yeah, so barriers towards nature, I think I haven't experienced it as much now that I'm older, although I do have a chronic illness, so I've got endometriosis, and I think part of the barrier is also sometimes like lack of access to loos and like not a lot of seating space, so those kinds of things. So it's kind of similar to what Dave was saying as well, like very physically accessible staff. But from a different part of view, like for me, as someone who has emigrated to with my family when I was very young and has grown up initially very, very rurally in Slovakia, where like we literally live next to a forest, like we could see it from our, windows, from our balconies. Like it was a very integral part of my life and my upbringing. And to then have immigrated to Lincolnshire, where it's very urban, and it's just fields, and all of a sudden you're in an environment where there are and like environmental obstacles, because it's not just like integrally in your space anymore. There are economical obstacles because my parents couldn't afford to then drive somewhere, and like, oh, all of a sudden like like nature became a commodity that like you had to have a car to go to, you had to pay to go to. So there's all of these like issues and various factors, and also educational, because when I was growing up in Slovakia, from primary school age, we were doing natural history lessons, and that's not something that's here. So there were like this kind of accumulation of barriers all of a sudden for someone who has grown up with nature and like has always been, a space that I've been in without having to think about it, to all of a sudden having it stripped from you is quite harsh, especially in like such a new environment. So yeah, I think that those were the obstacles, and I haven't found my way back towards nature until like literally a year ago, when I've started working for the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, because all of those changes meant that the trajectory of like my career and the way I decided to spend my time meant that nature wasn't involved with that, because it wasn't really feasible for it to be.
Well, you're most welcome among us, Sarah, and we're already enjoying the benefits of the work that you're doing at Norfolk Wildlife Trust. So thank you. Ellie, how about you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think some of the sort of barriers I've experienced are, that similar in terms of a sort of physical barrier. For the trans community at the moment, bathrooms are very much in the news. That's something that is quite limiting. And I'm very pleased to see NWT acknowledging that and making steps towards gender neutrality in a lot of the bathrooms. That's fantastic. Thank you. And also things like travel, is one of the things I think pre-transition I hadn't really considered, is actually, there's quite a lot of certainly overseas conferences that are in places that, to be honest, I'm not comfortable to visit anymore. And there's been a few that I've attended remotely, which has obviously carbon footprint benefits as well. So not all a downside, but it does affect your interaction with those people. But I think, to be honest, certainly for the queer community, I think it's the sort of anxiety around acceptance as much as that is a barrier. It's a sort of a self-imposed mental barrier, if you like, when the representation isn't there. Thinking about whether you're going to be welcome or not. And for someone like me who's had the privilege to be involved in the natural history scene for decades in Norfolk, it's not so daunting. But for many other folk it is. And I know from talking to LGBTQ folk at conferences that they really feel that.
What do we say as an organisation, thinking here Norfolk Wildlife Trust, but it applies to many organisations? We were founded 99 3/4 years ago by 12 white upper middle class wealthy men wearing tweed, and for a long time there's been a lot of tweed in our background, and more recently Gore-Tex and Vibram soles. We've been very much a a nature organization in quite a masculine, outdoorsy, rugged male kind of way. What do we say to people who are nice people, good people, thoughtful people who don't want diversity shoved in their face? Sarah, I'll come to you first, if I may.
Oh my gosh. So in a nice way, the things we say is, just for me, it's always coming back to a point of empathy and like explaining the different, because I think a lot of the time, people like a lot of the I don't know, like reluctance, I guess, to change comes from a place of fear because people don't like change. And so it's just kind of opening that up and be like, so look at the positives of like, what do you love? And like, why do you love this space? And what do you love about it so much? And then like, don't you want to like share that with all of these people, or like having all of these people here will open it to more younger people or a varied amount of people will love it, which means that we can care for it better. So it's kind of like almost creating a sense of a community and like coming at it from like a place of like, what do you love, and a place of empathy, and that like when we love something, like we want to share it. And it's kind of busting myths as well about these like fears that people have that are very natural to us as humans, but yeah, they aren't always like well founded in any like particular, reasons.
Just resistance to change. Dave, you must
Yeah.
encounter resistance constantly in your work. Would you like to add something here?
Yeah, sure. So I guess there's a number of ways that Sarah picked up on, but I suppose what I would say is initially, um, do, having a diverse group of people engaged in nature gives you a diverse set of opinions and conversations, but also, as I mentioned earlier, you know, so that's 30% of the economy, the politics, etc. So if you exclude those, that's 1/3. But it's not just 1/3. Every single person will, at some point in their life, not to be too morbid, either die or need accessibility. And so that is everybody who needs access to nature. So the cliche character that you're talking about, if they are coming up with resistance to say, well, we don't want these people in nature, we don't want to build access, then they're excluding themselves. And more than that, I, I think Sarah, Ellie, and I could probably all relate to this point, is that, again, 30% of the population, disabled people, probably more. There is at least one person in every single one of those people's lives who is invested in them. So that's 60%. And so I think that's the same for anyone in the marginalized community. They have at least one other person who's invested in their lives. And so that makes up a huge number of the population who want to access nature and have the right and have the economic power, the political power, so really, the cliched people who are saying no are the ones becoming the minority now. So they should really be nice to us.
Ellie, I see you nodding along furiously. What have you got for us?
Well, I mean, I think for me, the message to those folk is in the nicest possible way. This isn't, this representation isn't necessarily for you. It's about, it's going back to what I was saying before, really. And again, I think, the trans life gives you a really good perspective on this, because you've got sort of before and after experience, if you like. And I knew from my, I've always been a passionate ally, that I knew how important representation was in theory, but now experiencing in practice, because this default assumption, I think, for the majority of folk is that because they are the majority, they can walk into a situation where they don't know the people or they don't know the place and feel that they are very likely to be accepted, if they adhere to social norms or whatever. But the reality for a lot of minority groups is that they don't have that assumption because lived experience has not given you that. It's not given us this, right? So that representation is really what's the best evidence as a queer person or any member of minority that you can get that you'll be accepted in a scenario is to see someone else who you relate to who's just like you being accepted themselves. That is hard, real evidence. We're all scientists. Everyone here is scientists, really, or have an interest in science. Evidence is what we talk about, and the evidence that you need to see is that people who you can relate to, people who reflect your life and your experience, are being accepted by that community.
Thank you very much, Ellie. What's been some good news that or a punch the air moment that you've had in relation to nature this year through your own journey? Sarah, I'll come to you.
I think for me, it must be the fact that we've gone to Pride for the first time as Norfolk Wildlife Trust this year, and it was really huge for us. And it's something that I've worked really hard towards. And there was definitely some worry about, how it would be accepted online, what the response would be, because we know it's like not always the nicest place to be, but like yeah, I'm really glad that we've persisted and the response has been like really positive, and the actual experience for everyone, whether it was staff or the people that we have dealt with during Pride and the stall and the parade, as well as the extra events like the panel that we had, were just fantastic. And like the feedback we had was like just so heartwarming and genuinely, to me, just shows the need for it and like the incredible work that we've done, but also the kind of the long journey that we have ahead as well. But that for me was, a really special moment for me in nature in my career this year.
Congratulations for helping make that happen, and good luck to you in the events that you've got lined up for 2026 in our centenary. Ellie, what's been a punch the air moment with nature or for inclusion in nature for you this year?
I think, just seeing, what NWT were doing in this sector for LGBTQ folk was, when in a time when people were kind of, a bit reticent really to make that push to put heads above parapets, to be honest, in both NGOs and businesses and charities, all sorts, seeing that. But I think before that as well, a conference that I regularly attend, a work conference, which has in the past been very male dominated, had a very sort of alpha male atmosphere, lots of positives about it, but I think felt very exclusive. Women felt very excluded at this conference, and just seeing that transform into, just by dint of having a more balanced program in relation to gender, and just changing that, that I think this idea that, okay, some of these things are really culturally embedded and change takes ages. Actually, it doesn't have to. If the folk are right, it can happen really quickly if people are receptive to it, and you actually find that a lot more people were thinking the same as you, but just hadn't said it. And I think that's the thing that I got out of it, is the pace of change can be really rapid when you want it to be.
Thanks, Ellie. And I can see Dave nodding along very, very firmly to that point there, Dave.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for me, it's been seeing exactly a bit like what Ellie was saying, what can happen. So our experience in campaigning for accessibility hasn't always been the greatest, particularly unfortunately with both Norfolk and Norwich Council. It's often been a battle. But working with NWT was, I'm not even sure that there's a word that can fully describe how pretty bloody amazing it's been. With the council, when there's a path or a ramp or something, we are fighting for centimeters to try and get a 1.8 meter path. You know, we're lucky if we get a 1.5 meter path where you can't have someone in a mobility equipment walking next to an able-bodied person or whatever. You can't. You get 1.5 at best, and you need to be grateful. With NWT, they said you can have your paths, you can have your gates, you can have your signs, you can have, and by the way, what else do you want? And we were like, well, we want a changing places toilet, we want a car park, we want, and they were like, okay, well, there you go. Ian was like, and what else do you want? And we were like, well, you know, we want the what's that app? I can't think of the name of the app for people with vision impairments to have audio. And Ian was like, sure, there you go. And what else? And it's like, wow, thank you so much. So hearing that you've got that land and that there's going to be a visitor space with a changing places toilet, for me is just like there isn't a word to say how punch the air I am about it.
That's wonderful to hear. It's profoundly moving to hear Ellie's experience as an outsider to NWT, although a long-term member, and your experience, Dave, and thank you for that. And I can see lots of members of our wonderful council and our senior leadership team looking very moved to hear that experience. As we enter our centenary year, we're 100 years old. We've achieved all of the things for wildlife that you've heard about this evening, and we're ambitious to achieve a huge amount more. What's one really important thing you'd like us to achieve for inclusion, to make nature in Norfolk more accessible, more welcoming for everybody, so everyone feels that it's their place where they're welcome and safe? Ellie, can I come to you?
That's a big question, but
A mighty
I think
question.
for me, I think what I'd really like to see, I think there are lots of amazing organisations, of which NWT are most definitely one, making huge leaps and gains in terms of becoming more inclusive. What I'd really like to see is that joining up with other organisations, because I think there are a lot of like-minded people across many organizations, and I think there's so much capacity for collaborative working here. And I speak, you know, the BTO being one who does not have, you know, we are not the size. We do what we can. I think that's what I would really love to see, is some of these initiatives just being pushed out in a collaborative way, really.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Dave, to you.
I think I'm probably going to be repeating what Ellie said, but something that I harp on about in terms of the culture change to make inclusion a core part of any development is having stakeholders on board from the inception of any project, you know, and not just of developments and projects, but involved in the work, you know, having a full range of diversity on your team, because, you know, having lived experience is there isn't a replacement for it. You can't pick up a document full of regulations that say this is how you should include people from all of these groups, and compare that to the lived experience of having a human being there on site, having their voices heard. Ellie said several times something which is close to my heart, which is representation. You know, having someone with a disability or of any other kind of marginalized background in a position where their voices are heard gives inspiration to the rest of that community. But it does more than that. It reduces poverty in a way that, you know, people's mental health is improved, and so therefore they're able to contribute more to the economy. That in turn reduces crime. So that reduces the impact on NHS, on the police. That builds the social fabric of our community, makes Norwich and Norfolk a nicer place to live. So, it benefits everyone when all groups are included from the start and along the whole path. So stakeholder engagement.
Thank you very much, Dave. Sarah, what would you most like to achieve during our centenary year?
How can I follow that? I basically 100% just agree with what Dave said, and he just put it so beautifully and eloquently, and essentially is working with diverse people for diverse people, and just being really aware of having those conversations and keeping those conversations going as we work on project as we go forward. And I think also, like, culturally just keeping in mind that diversity is so intersectional, and as Dave has mentioned previously, we can all become we can all need accessibility aids future down the line. Or, I'm currently working on dementia training and putting together dementia friendly walks for 2026. Again, that's something that affects a huge huge amount of our population, especially with our older demographic. And so it's just keeping in mind that, like, the lowering, I don't remember what the saying is, but it's something about lowering the curb for the pram lowers the curb for everyone. And I think that's what people need to remember, is that, if you help one group to help them enjoy nature and access it, that's most likely to have a ripple effect across all sorts of other groups. And it will have such an almost invisible impact that you won't even realize in so many people's lives. And that's ultimately what I want to work towards.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's been an enormous privilege and an honour to listen to you speaking from your point of view of experience this evening. Patrick, can I bring you back in? I've seen one or two questions pop up in the chat. I think you're fielding questions, aren't you?
We have got a few questions coming in, Nick. So we have Caroline Spinks here, and she says, I think a lot boils down to respect for one another and the space you are visiting. I think we all need to be gently challenging those that are being disrespectful. Has the panel got evidence of peer pressure working positively in this way in wild places? Good question.
Fine question. Dave, can I start with you?
Oh, the thing that comes to mind is Marriott's Way as access to Sweetbriar Marsh. And it's a very, very, very tricky subject because cyclists along there are commuting. A number of cyclists along there are not the most pleasant of people. And so I'm not painting all cyclists with the same brush, but I've certainly been sworn at. I've seen a friend of mine who is visually impaired with her guide dog. She's been shouted at. You can imagine standing in a space, if you have your eyes closed, you can't see anything. You don't know which side the cyclist is coming. Somebody's shouting at you. The amount of fear in your heart that it strikes it is going to stop you from ever going to that place ever again. And so peer pressure, I'm not so sure, but if you know someone who's a cyclist, please do tell them to be considerate. I would like to see signs along Marriott's Way that sort of say to cyclists, please, or to everyone, be respectful, be considerate, and have signage with representation of disabled people, of older people, of anyone who's vulnerable or marginalized on the signage, which gives representation for a start that we exist, but also secondly kind of encourages respect and consideration.
Thank you, Dave. Sarah, have you witnessed, as in Caroline's question, positive peer pressure within communities that are helping to change attitudes?
Yeah, in a way, I think a lot of times, so what I've mainly noticed is stuff that I'd see people comment on like social media, and sometimes people will just say, and you know this person and like know them secondhand, and you don't see them as someone who would ever say a mean comment, and sometimes says something weird. And I think the good peer pressure is if you alert other people that they said this. And I just messaged them and I'd be like, I just saw this and like, I just want to ask you, what do you mean by that? And like unpacking that in a way and like challenging it, but not like, I mean, address it from like a sense of curiosity. And I think most of the time you find that people are actually like really back down after being challenged on it because they realize that if you discuss it with them and you're like, well, this is like my experience and actually these are like some of the facts and that this is the field I work in and this is what I think, then I like a lot of the time they're like, oh, actually I feel like I've just said this because like I've heard so many people around me say it, and like people do, it's not just children that parrot, it is something that's like a social behavior that it's something people do. It's the way that if you spend a lot of time with someone, you kind of start picking up their mannerisms or the way they pronounce their words or, the way they are. So I think I've seen it happen in like my social circles with that approach. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Sarah. Ellie, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I think there's two things going on, aren't there? Because you've got direct discrimination and then you've got a sort of subconscious bias. And I think all I'd say was that I think peer pressure or awareness raising really can be really valuable in combating subconscious bias because people simply do not realize that the thing they're doing is exclusive. And so it's generally folk who are already on message anyway. So I think that's hugely powerful. I think for direct discrimination, it's more difficult. And I think it's also more difficult if you're dealing with general public than you are with, say, as I do, volunteers who are training other volunteers, for example, where again. So I think it is possible. And I think it's really, for subconscious bias, I think it's really effective, actually.
Patrick, who's up next?
We have Carolyn Robinson, and she says, I recently attended one of the community discussions about the next 25-year development for nature in claylands. I noticed that probably all the people in attendance were of the mature age group. I wonder how NWT can help younger adults and people engage.
That's a
perennial question, isn't it?
It's a mighty question, and I would encourage Carolyn to look at our website and see some of the extraordinary initiatives that are taking place. And Eliot earlier made reference to lots of the youth initiatives that we have: the Youth Forum, Wilder Wardens, Wild Youth Action, the Youth Advisory Board, and our Work Experience Programme. There's a lot happening, and so we are recognising that diversity in age is also really, really important. We are doing our absolute best to encourage young people to become lifelong members, not just of Norfolk Wildlife Trust, but supporters of nature and the environment. So there is a great deal going on. However, you're absolutely right that there is a demographic of people who have the free time, perhaps the resources to be engaged with nature, and it's a really difficult nut to crack. I wonder whether any of the other panelists have something they want to contribute here. Ellie.
Yeah, can I just say, I think also it's about the mechanisms, right? So because you, as or myself as an older person, is also making choices about how I feed into, say, discussions about some sort of proposal, and I'm, of the era that would be quite happy to go to a public meeting and say something, with people I don't know. But whereas, online communication for younger folk is definitely something that they're much more comfortable with. So I think as well, you've got to be careful of saying, well, this is the way I've engaged. And so a lot of the people around here are, in a certain demographic group. It might be that there are other routes for others. So, we NWT clearly do a lot with youth, and BTO have lots of youth programs and initiatives as well. And there is just as much passion and actually just as much engagement. But to me, as a 50-something-year-old, a lot of it's quite invisible because it's happening through routes that I'm just not part of and not comfortable with myself, to be quite honest. And that's great. So I think it's providing that diversity of mechanisms for engagement, I think is the way forward.
Ellie and I went to both school and university together. We've known each other for a while. And so if she's describing herself in these fuddy-duddy terms, I have to embrace my own fuddy-duddy. Oh, Ellie, you've done for me there. Sarah, Dave, do you have anything on Dave? You're nodding there. What would you like to contribute?
Yeah, well, Sarah picked up on it earlier, but it's something that we see quite often is that if you make access for the most marginalized group, then you make access for everyone. So parents with younger kids, parents who are carers who need access, you know, engaging children at a young age in nature means that generally they're gonna fall in love with it. I'd find it hard to to know kids who have been brought up in nature to hate nature. So yeah, having kids that are brought up with bugs and flowers and plants and looking at the beautiful world that we have out here are going to be the ones to grow up and become the young adults who want to care about it. So yeah, um, uh, I- I'm always campaigning for access. Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. Sarah, is there something you want to contribute there?
No, I just agree with what everyone has said.
Yeah, thank you very much. More questions, Patrick, or are we?
We have well, Carolyn's made a point. She mentions, of course, I think younger adults have different pressures on their time, young families and work and so forth. It is really tricky, isn't it, to reach 30 somethings, 40 somethings in that phase of life, if that's where they are. She says finding ways to communicate for them may help them to be involved. And I was just looking, I asked a question earlier, but Nick, you basically asked it as well. I did have a question for the panel though, which was, it isn't really enough, and I think NWT really understands this now. It isn't enough, is it, just to have a nature reserve where you're really welcoming and you say you're welcome and you hope for lots of people to come, and you have to kind of go out into the community, don't you, and find people. But what are the kind of good ways of doing that? What are there some really practical examples there? I know that NWT is doing exactly this around Sweetbriar, aren't we?
Dave, do you want to?
Yeah, getting good volunteers involved and retained and people who are going to be committed is challenging. And I often say that you've got to go out and drag people in. You've really got to get people by the scruff of their necks and message them and phone them and encourage them with cake and whatever it takes, all of the different ways, the social media, the pop-up stands on the high street, the schools, get into schools, get into social clubs, what are they called? Norfolk Knights, wheelchair rugby. Go and have an event with them, invite them for an event. Food and that always goes a long way to hot pizza and mulled wine or whatever it is. Creating events for the diverse groups, and then having amazing people like Denzel on board is just always a win. Having those community engagement staff who are just such fantastic people. Who are gonna reach out again and again. Hey, I haven't heard from you. Are you coming along to this? You said you would come along. What time do you want me to meet you, etc. Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. Ellie?
Yeah, I also think, I agree with everything that Dave said about every sort of initiative that I've tried to get off the ground. But also, also finding out why people aren't turning up, I think is also, really powerful. Because what are we not? Is it just logistics? Is it because, you know, we're not providing something you want, we're not engaging in the right way? What is it you want from this experience? Because again, you know, we can't help ourselves. We all engage with nature in our own way, and we all make assumptions. We all do it. That everyone else will probably like to engage with nature in the same way, which is complete rubbish, isn't it? You know, we're all completely different individuals. So it's just finding out, you know, is it not providing what you want, or is it just the fact it is providing it and there's some logistic barrier? I think that's really important. And I think that's where finding the right community groups, the right ambassadors within those community groups, because you know, also trying to do that networking or trying to do that communication just from a central point is really difficult, and you really need to find the people who can help ask, because even asking the questions in the right way is really important as well. So it is just, you need that sort of buy-in from folk who have that lived experience, as you know, Dave and Sarah, they said many times, to guide you in asking those questions about what you're supposed to be, or what you would ideally be providing.
Thank you, Ellie. Sarah, I'm sure a lot of the work that you do is around identifying the barriers that we simply don't know that we've accidentally, in many cases, put in place to people's access and inclusion in nature.
Yes, absolutely. And again, Dave and Ellie have already kind of said all of the fantastic things. So it is all about, you know, the target groups, knowing which established groups to go to who do have that diverse audience, knowing what you're missing. And I think also knowing how to change your approach, and knowing that you, like, one approach doesn't fit all. Like, if, you know, if I go to speak to young refugees who probably have a language barrier, is going to be really different to going to Gypsy Roma traveller communities who, if they see you coming in your like Norfolk Wildlife Trust logo tops, are going to be like, you know, they won't want to talk to you, rightly so, because they have been through so much and been like, you know, persecuted by society, like historically. So there's so many different groups, and again, we're talking about that intersectionality and the fact that it's not one trait. You have to think of individuals as individuals as well, and everyone has a different story, and everyone, you know, you might be part of the LGBT group, but some people might love the term queer because we've reclaimed it, and some people might hate it because they have grown up with it whilst the queer bashing was around, and it's something that's super traumatic for them. And there's like a myriad of ways that people live their truths, and so you need to think of your approach very specifically to each individual in each group. And also something that I'm really conscious of is thinking of kind of in advance, like thinking into the future and thinking, okay, if I'm doing all of this work to try to engage with these groups and bring them to Norfolk Wildlife Trust, are we prepared to look after them? Like, will they actually feel safe? Do we have infrastructure in place? Do we have training in place for, especially in today's, you know, society where there's a lot of hatred going on, especially towards the trans community and the asylum refugee community? How, if those people are coming to our sites, how are we looking after them, and are they safe? Because I don't feel comfortable engaging with them and bringing them here if we can't look after them once they're there. So it's also thinking about like the final end of that product as well, and like where that journey ends. And I'd rather take it much slower, knowing that we're getting it right, than rush it and then actually be like, oh, but they actually don't feel welcome. Because although I've made them feel welcome when I've visited them, it wasn't necessarily the same story across our sites. Hopefully, of course, it is, because we're hoping we're attracting nice people to our reserves. But that is something I think a lot of people miss out from their work when they're working with diverse communities, is thinking about what happens once they're there.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Well, we've hit 8 o'clock, which is the time we all turn into pumpkins. So with huge thanks to Sarah Lapinova of Norfolk Wildlife Trust, and Dave Schrager of Inclusive Norwich, and Dr. Ellie Leach of the British Trust for Ornithology, I'll hand back to you, Patrick, our president.
Nick, thanks so much. Thank you for your brilliant chairing as always. And Sarah, Dave and Ellie, thanks so much for your contributions tonight. It's been a really fascinating discussion. this brings us to the close of what feels like an epic AGM, not really in time, but in sheer information. I hope you've learned something new. I certainly have. I hope you feel enthused about the year to come. I would like to finish by thanking again Eliot Lyne, our Chief Executive, for brilliant leadership and a great talk tonight. And particularly thanking our superb outgoing chair, Alice Liddle, for her 9 years of stellar service. Alice, congratulations on becoming our new Vice President. And I'd like to congratulate our new chair, Matthew Bradbury, who is incredibly talented and experienced and will bring a load of great things to this vital role. So thanks again. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And I should just thank Marion as well, who has put all this together with the help of my voice. As usual, unsung hero doing all the work in the background there. Thank you, Marion. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. And see you out there, Foxit, Hickling at Sweetbriar, somewhere cool, full of nature. See you there soon. Bye.